President.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. And when we left for the lunch break, I was speaking about the diversification, in particular the manufacturing sector, and had gotten to the point of the special economic zones, giving an indication that we are working with the OECD and with Global Forum, and that we hope to have this system of incentivization of businesses in particular categories and across all kinds of zones right throughout the region, including the rural areas, really to benefit and to stimulate growth in all of the sectors which are earmarked for development. So, Madam, I was speaking to all of the projects, as a matter of fact, that are in train for this fiscal year and which will be completed by the end of this fiscal year. And so said, so done. This SEZ project will be completed by September 2019 and more than likely legislated as well. As I move on from manufacture, just let me speak to the cocoa chocolate industry, just to speak to two successes, to mark them. One was relates to downstream and the development of high value production of chocolate, and that is the opening of the chocolate box, which is the first storefront of Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company at the Hilton, Trinidad and Tobago. Also, only 1 week ago, I would have witnessed the launch of 2 national standards for cocoa related to quality and sampling, and this would have been developed by Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards in collaboration with the Cocoa Research Center at the University of the West Indies, the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, and also the Cocoa Development Company of Trinidad and Tobago. Moving on from there, those are just the first 2 standards, and there are several other standards that are being developed relating to conformity assessment programs and developing other standards like national good agricultural practices and so on, other related standards which I will speak to when we come for the budget. I want to go to assure the country as well and manufacturers that work is apace with regard to our national quality policy, which was approved by Cabinet in 2018. There are 3 projects underway, and one of them, very important, the program for the accreditation of public laboratories. That project is well underway, and it will assist public laboratories to develop their management systems, their policies and procedures, to ensure that there is consistency in operations and adherence to international standards. And that is going to go across the board in terms of the personnel, the equipment, the methods of testing, measurement. This is also going to benefit our manufacturers. It benefits every man in the street because you're talking about health as well. That project is on, and it's going to last for a few years, but it starts in June 2019. Also, the National Quality Policy has been approved, and National Quality Council, which is responsible for the strategic oversight, is already in place. And also what we are starting as well is the overall independent national accreditation body for conformity assessment, and it's called Trinidad and Tobago Accreditation Service for Conformity Assessment. The grant fund facility, which we've introduced for manufacturers, small and medium, and for agro-processors as well. 4 have been granted. We want more people to benefit from this facility. So in fact, I'm going to review the application process and ensure that it is not too stringent and that people can easily benefit from it. And if those that were involved are in printing and publishing, cocoa processing, food processing, and packaging materials as well. With regard to the Research and Development Fund, 5 have been approved thus far, and we're happy to promote, again, research and development and innovation, particularly within the manufacturing sector. Or e-commerce. As part of the National E-commerce Strategy, which we've spoken of in March, the Ministry held its first forum, which was called Empowering Entrepreneurs Through E-commerce and E-Services. That featured international speakers, and the room was filled with a number of young and new entrepreneurs. And together with Export TT, the Ministry will also host a commenced in July, a series of training sessions, again, aimed at the new and existing MSMEs who are going to use this e-commerce platform and tool. And we're going to start from the basics, how to go online, how to market your goods and services online and so on. And that's just the way it has to be. So that you really want to ensure that all of these new businesses, new products, unique products, are able to go online and use that platform to sell their products all across the world at a very low cost. I want to talk about the creative industry because it's doing so very well. And I'll go straight to fashion. And to say that the Ultra Bespoke Tailoring Programs, that certificate program, which was launched in 2018, was actually concluded in 2019. And this was done, as you know, in collaboration with MIC and the Savile Row Bespoke Academy. Anyone who witnessed a graduation exercise would have realized the quality of the products that these graduates were able to produce, and a total of 27 persons would have graduated, and they learned specialist bespoke tailoring and hand-sewn craft skills and paper cutting and so on. And we are excited as to where this will go. The next phase, before we get to the actual professional phase, if you call it, for us at Fashion TT and the ministry, we have to look at the marketing. So we have created what is called a lookbook, which is focused on this ultra bespoke tailoring products. Then that lookbook will be distributed to retail stores placed in strategic locations at our missions abroad and so on. And the idea is this has great export potential. And I think of a guy called Don Lee, who was at presentation. I don't know if anybody in here was at presentation. And Don Lee has gone on to be a fantastic bespoke tailor in Canada. He's doing product actually for the Oscars and so on. That's the level which he's doing. Please, Madam President. I even remember a tailor from Point Fortin who also got into bespoke tailoring, living in Washington, who has done extremely well. The potential is great, and what we see here is the development of the tailoring industry, not just the tailoring, but the customized tailoring industry for export. We are excited about it, and we're going to move on to the next phase in terms of professional teaching, which is the train-the-trainer program. And I'll come to the question of certification or accreditation and enlighten the audience on that. The training program now is an advanced program which will commence this year, and it's going to target, it's particularly difficult, 18 persons, and those were persons who would have participated in the Ultra Bespoke certificate course, and this is to put them in a position where they would become master tailors, and also where they can more persons in bespoke tailoring. So that is, again, is going to be done in conjunction with MIC and the Savile Row Bespoke Academy, and this expansion. The expansion of this industry is expected to boost the overall fashion industry in Trinidad and Tobago. I know that the opposition may, and rightfully so, bring up the question of the certification. Whenever you have a new program, it is only after the program has completely finished that the certification is done. Not during, because you have to certify based on the entire program. So we are almost at the end of the certification of the actual course, and then after that will be the accreditation of any associated institution.
Minister, you have 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. Thank you. So here we are with that, and we are moving ahead with the involvement of more people in the fashion industry. The Fashion Value Chain Investment Program, there are about 150 persons involved in that program at the level of the global value chain. Those are for ready exporters, but also at the level of where strategic training is involved, and also where we are working in tandem with NETCO, to facilitate business mentoring and that kind of thing. We're moving ahead also with the live music district, which has thus far for this phase, we have entered phase 3 in March of this year. There are 40 venues that are participating, that have agreed to participate in phase 3 and 4. Already there have been 44 performances. The Port of Spain City Corporation has joined with us, and also the Ministry of Community Development. So there's now live at lunch, live at the promenade, live at the gardens, live at the square, and so on. So this is moving moving ahead. The artist development program, I'm going to finish soon. The artist development program is also on, and there are a number of persons. I wish I could find. There are 4 persons who have broken into the international market, and when I have more time, I will speak of it. We are looking at fashion standards, and therefore Fashion TT, in collaboration with Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards, has established a new standard in the fashion industry known as a guide for the selection of fabrics. This is not only for those in the industry, but it's even for anybody out there who's buying fabrics, so that they can understand what is to expect, what they should insist on when they're buying proper fabric. And in film, we are making some strides again. We have had about 12 million in spend in the last 6 months. We would have facilitated 8 international television production crews in here, and that's the level of spend that we would have had. And we just also hosted a familiarization tour for film location managers in Trinidad, 3 of them. The Tobago Marina facility is on, and the successful bidder at this time is engaged in feasibility studies, designs, detailed designs, and construction, and that kind of thing. We are quite excited about the possibilities of the logistics industry. On the next occasion, I will speak about the interventions locally and foreign as well, locally with the work of Ramps Logistics, which we're quite pleased about. So work continues as well with our business reforms. We go live with the construction permitting system, live by end June 2019. And we are at the testing stage. Ministry of Planning and Development has worked very well with our SEW people and the contractors, and we're very pleased about that. Work continues on the integrated risk management system and the port community system. That we see this as being extremely important to ensure that our goods entering and leaving this country is done efficiently in terms of time and in terms of spend as well. We continue to work again on building confidence in the economy. The Minister of Finance would have spoken to evidence of confidence in terms of the growth of consumer loans and borrowings, the vehicle sales which have gone up, the demand for credit which has gone up as well, the private sector in credit increased substantially, evidencing that confidence is returning to Trinidad and Tobago in the business sector and with individuals as well. So, Madam Speaker, we couldn't be more happy about the pace that we have made, the fact that we have stabilized, the fact that we are on a growth trajectory. We are positive. We invite the rest of the population to be positive. And with our mantra on this side, we all remain selfless. We work with objectivity, we remain accountable and open to the population, we are honest, and we act with integrity under the leadership of our Prime Minister, who is a very, very capable leader, Dr. the Honourable Keith Rowley. I thank you.
Senator Ameen.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, we'll have a Madam Prime Minister just now. Just now. Madam President, life under this Rowley-led government is difficult. This government is now in its 4th year. And I listened to the speaker before me describe so many programs and projects that are really just words here. As I join in this debate, Madam President, on an act to supplement the appropriation of the sum of issue, of which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2019 Act 2018. I come after the Minister of Trade, who just 1 month ago was quoted and as the subject of a headline in a newspaper, trying to assure manufacturers in Trinidad and Tobago that things are looking up. And the headline was, "Recession Done." Madam President, Madam President, if we begin with the PNM's manifesto at 2015, at the beginning of their term, and look at every successive budget and every successive midterm review, it is very clear that the PNM has a number of broken promises. But it is a lot of the things that they continue to talk about is just pie in the sky. They promised sandals that failed. They promised the Labre dry dock facility that has been postponed a number of times. They promised the Dragon gas deal that failed. The Phoenix Park industrial zone. They promised to attract foreign investment. They are failing. They promised to make Trinidad and Tobago safer. They are failing miserably. They promised to restore the sea bridge. They have failed at that. But Madam President, more dangerous and frightening than their failure is that they have also been trying to sell us an alternative reality. I mentioned the statement by the Minister of Trade, "Recession Done." That is one in a series of statements by members of this government. The Minister of Finance declared boldly, the economy is turning around. The economy is turning the corner. Things are getting bright. Well, I can tell you one bright thing that lies in our future is the rising sun and the return of the UNC into government. For Madam President, for the average citizen and for the business community, what is the reality in Trinidad and Tobago? The reality is that there is no turnaround. The reality is that things are not better. Businesses are being forced to close every day, and especially small businesses. Have they provided any solutions? Have they provided anything to stimulate businesses? People are losing their jobs. People are being fired by this government directly, and in addition, with the interruption of the program of works and the uncertainty in especially the construction industry, many are losing their jobs. Despite the misleading rhetoric of turnaround and stabilization perpetuated by members of the government, Madam President, independent international organizations are painting a complete opposite picture. And it is not only the untruths from this government. They are now doing something very frightening. They are trying to convince us, the population in Trinidad and Tobago, that these reputable international organizations are telling untruths. They call it fake news. That is their new favorite term, fake news. A helicopter crash, they call it an emergency landing. Again, and then accuse the rest of the country of giving fake news. It seems to be the modus operandi of this Keith Rowley administration to classify any expert or any institution or any individual that states a position that the government does not like to the public as calling them a peddler of fake news. And they go as far as to call you unpatriotic. And I mentioned the danger of that in our last debate, Madam President, where we spoke about changing the national flower to the double chaconia, the importance of patriotism, and why it's dangerous for this government to be labeling people who are serving the best interests of Trinidad and Tobago as unpatriotic, and their new term, fake news. So, Madam President, in sticking to their claim that things are better, I want to give a few examples. For instance, the World Bank, 3 points that came out from the World Bank. They indicated that Trinidad and Tobago is one of only 4 countries that the World Bank estimates that this year will have weaker economies by the end of 2019. The other three countries are Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Argentina. They also stated that Trinidad and Tobago has the highest fiscal deficit as a percentage of gross domestic product in Central America and the Caribbean. Third, they stated that the GDP contracted by 2% in 2017. And
Give the source. Did you state where you're reading from? You did?
yes.
I'm sorry, all right.
And I will supply all information to answer after as well. So they stated that the GDP contracted by 2% in 2017 and 1% in 2018, and is expected to contract by 0.5% in 2019. Completely different to what the government is saying or trying to tell us. The Minister of Finance tried to dismiss the independent organizations, and he responded to the IMF by stating the IMF had projected a 0% growth in Trinidad and Tobago in 2019, Trinidad and Tobago's GDP in 2019. And according to the IMF World Economic Outlook released earlier this month, the country only achieved 0.3% growth in 2018, which is less than the 1.9% growth projected by the government. So the IMF's forecast contradicts the government's latest assertion that the country is no longer in recession. It is an untruth. It is a picture that they try to continue to paint to save themselves, and it is not saving Trinidad and Tobago. If there is anybody who is being unpatriotic in this instance, it is the present PNM government. Madam President, another one is Fitch Solutions. Fitch Solutions is an industry-leading provider of financial information services, which is based on official data where unavailable publicly. It is also public knowledge that Fitch Solutions is affiliated with Fitch Ratings Incorporated, and the country and industry data is their stock in trade. So over the last couple months, Fitch Solutions had indicated that over the medium term, quote, over the medium term, we expect the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago will devalue the dollar. Our view is underpinned by our expectation that Trinidad and Tobago's external accounts will remain weak, keeping the peg under downside pressure and undermining the bank's ability to support the peg, end quote. Another quote, capital outflows have been primarily driven by a weak business environment and Trinidad and Tobago's unfavorable interest rate differential with the US. Fitch concluded, end quote, sorry. Fitch concluded that Trinidad and Tobago risks capital flight in response to its deteriorating outlook and the likelihood of more substantial currency devaluations. Madam President, everything that the Minister of Finance and this Rowley-led government has been saying to us, to this nation, about economic turnaround, about turning the corner, they are false statements. They are made with deliberate intent to deceive. They are intentional truths and falsehoods, and they must stop. Madam President, another indicator that has many concerns is the ease of doing business ranking. And in Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago went from 66 out of 189 countries in 2014 to 105 in 2018. A fall of 39, which means that it is easier to do business in 104 other countries besides Trinidad and Tobago. So no wonder you have the prediction of enormous capital flight and no foreign direct investment. it seems that, Madam President, the only people who are finding it easy to do business under this government seems to be the wives of government ministers and certain elites. Yes, I have to go there because it is happening. It is a fact. And I hope those who are grown and well, unfortunately, some of them are not in cabinet to have an input when those decisions are being made. But, Madam President.
Ameen, first of all,
Yes.
please address the chair.
Certainly.
Other members, please listen. Let us listen to Senator Ameen in silence. Continue, Senator Ameen.
So, Madam President, while it seems easy for certain elite and certain people who are related to government ministers to do business in the billions of dollars in this country, unemployment is on the increase for the ordinary man. That is the reality of the ordinary citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, the speaker before me spoke about the condition of things when they came into government in 2015, and that things had already started to decline. I want to remind Trinidad and Tobago and remind those on the other side that it is a fact that under the former UNC-led government, Trinidad and Tobago had the lowest ever unemployment rate in the history of Trinidad, of this nation. So, as you are as you are accustomed to doing, feel free to blame the leader of opposition, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, for that. It was the former government that took the unemployment rate from 5.9% under the PNM in 2010 to its lowest ever, which was 3.3% in 2014. When we demitted office, the unemployment rate was 3.4%. So, Madam President, we have to ask ourselves, where are we now under the PNM government? Not one of them could stand on the other side, could stand and say that they have reduced the unemployment rate. So even if you try to blame the previous government, blame us for reducing unemployment in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, according to the Review of the Economy 2018, for the period January to September 2017, the unemployment rate, thanks to the PNM, is now at 5%. 5%. Joblessness under this government, Madam President, unemployment and underemployment, lack of job security, unemployed of the very qualified. Those are issues that affect the psyche of not only our young people, but the working class in general. The UNC's track record of job growth while in government is in stark contrast to that of this administration that has been in government for 4 years without having a turnaround. It has been a miserable 4 years for employees, and even by extension, Madam President, the trade unions, because when they fire so many people, they fire people on this large-scale basis, the union membership decline, and they are borderline wiping out some of these unions by decreasing their membership and decreasing their power. Madam President, I was very proud to be associated with the last UNC-led government because it was a very labor-friendly government, and in fact, probably one of the most labor-friendly governments since the independence of Trinidad and Tobago, because we had that collaborative approach, that collaborative relationship with unions and union leaders and stakeholders in general. It was because of that, partially because of that, the former UNC government was able to create over 55,000 new jobs. In addition to ensuring that the union things, as you call them, the negotiations, the collective agreements and so on, that they were done, they were signed, and improved the quality of life of working people in this government. But under the PNM, what do you have? More jobs being lost, more people being fired. Madam President, I encounter young people who are qualified and who cannot find a job to suit their qualification. that is very demoralizing to our nation and particularly to young people. One of the other concerns, Madam President, is that throughout the government service, even where there are jobs or there are positions to be filled, they are being filled with short-term contract employment. It means that there is no job security, that these persons who serve in these contract positions also are not afforded, you know, some of the protections that we fight for. And I must say the generation before us fought to protect workers in Trinidad and Tobago, and you are denying them that. I'm sorry that the Minister of Trade, the Honorable, sorry, not the Minister of Trade, the Minister of Labor and Small Enterprises, the Honorable Jennifer Baptiste-Primus, is not here today because she's out of the country. I know I have heard her on various occasions in public, at public events, mentioning the fact that the government intends to work on reducing contract labor within the public service and ensuring that vacancies in the public service are filled. That has been said for 4 years. I have seen nothing with that improvement, and it is just another failure. Is it just another failure by this government? And I know perhaps this would have been an excellent opportunity for the minister to explain the progress in those promises and indicate whether it is yet another empty promise from this government. Madam President, when I look at the variations proposed before us under the various heads and subheads, I have seen, we see a number of instances where contract employment, where monies are being supplemented to facilitate the payment of salaries and so on in the area of contract employment. And so I want to go into that a bit, Madam President, as I just touch on some of the heads that I have concerns over. Before I do that, Madam President, anyway. Madam President, I want to begin with, very recently in the public domain, there has been much criticism from the Associated Union with regards to contract employment and the changes in the employment regime in the judiciary. The sum of 682,000 has been requested to facilitate the payment of salaries and arrears of salaries to contract officers in the family court. So that is under 02-001-16, which is contract employment. So, Madam President, it must be noted that the workers have been expressing concern that they would be out of a job as of September 1st, when the court develops a new court system that will be guided by the new Criminal Division and District Criminal and Traffic Courts Bill. The union leader who represents them has been quoted as saying, and they feel that they will be fired by September 1st, but, and even before that. So they have been calling for a response from the judiciary and questioning the procedure. The issue here, Madam President, is that 800 persons working in the judiciary are at risk of losing their jobs, and they are going to abolish over 600 positions. The other 200 will probably be told, go back to the Service Commission, reapply, take leave, and so on. But again, it speaks to the issue of contract employment and lack of job security and putting people on the breadline. My question has to do, one, with the workers. Will the process of filling the vacant positions in the criminal division affect the existing judiciary employees? I also have concerns about the functioning of the court. How will this lack of job security and these contract positions affect the functioning of the court? I also have concerns with regards to the condition, the existing space where you are going to have 600 new positions, and you have, is it the same space that you're going to utilize for, and where are you going to provide for the new employees under the same poor working conditions? But Madam President, employment is not, contract employment issues are not restricted to the judiciary. Throughout the public service, the minister, would have spoken about reducing contract employment, and it seems to be just another empty promise. In 2017, the head of the Economic Development Board, who, by the way, is appointed by the government, so that the head of the Economic Development Board was appointed by this PNM government, advised that the public service system was an outdated bureaucracy and needed to be reformed and replaced with human resource departments to make hiring qualified professionals more efficient. Added to that, recently at a GSC concerning the establishment of Service Commission in Tobago, Minister Fitzgerald Haynes also echoed similar sentiments, and he stated that the Public Service Commission in this country is problematic, and that he supported, his views were actually supported by the leader of government business, Minister of Planning, Mrs. Camille Robinson Regis. But we have not seen, although they have spoken, they have made statements, we have not seen any action, any planning in the direction of reducing contract employment. So I want to ask, on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, when it comes to job security, stop mamaguying the population. Work on really creating job security and proper planning for employment, and do your part to ensure good relations between government and labor. Madam President, another area that I think, Madam President, that comes under the is the personnel department of the public Ministry of Public Administration. While workers are going home, while you are removing people with job security and hiring people on contract with no job security, while you are firing people left, right, and center, the government comes to this parliament to ask for $2 million, which is the sum required to customize and outfit a new building situated at number 3 Alexander Street, St. Clair, which was procured to relocate the staff of the personnel department. Priorities? Yeah. These are your priorities? Madam President, this issue was the subject of a lot of public debate. And it was, in fact, because of the leader of opposition that the population got to know about this scandalous matter. When a lot of it had to do with the negotiations for the property when it started, and whether the Attorney General of the Trinidad and Tobago benefited inappropriately. Madam President, I want to join in the voices that have expressed concern over the procurement of this property at number 3 Alexander, which is associated with the Attorney General. The additional funds being requested today of $2 million to outfit the building. Madam President, we have no indication whether this is a total cost to outfit the building. And from what we have heard in the public domain, the cost is really $38 million. So this $2 million is just a little drop in the bucket. So you have already spent $38 million to outfit the building, and then you are asking for an additional $2 million. Madam President, it is very clear from looking at this matter that the move from where the personnel department was housed in Barataria, where what was a rented property as well, was not a move that was planned in advance. It is very clear that the decision to move to number 3 Alexander seems to be an unplanned and perhaps a forced decision, a decision that was forced upon the Public Administration Ministry of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, the Minister of Public Administration indicated in Parliament in response to this matter that in 2009, the government back then had expressed interest in renting the property and so on. She had indicated that in 2012, and this seems to be trying to pull the UNC into the bacchanal. She said that in 2012, under the UNC, the Minister of Housing, then Dr. Rudal Munilal, wrote to the Attorney General's wife requesting about the availability of the same building. She was very careful to gloss over the fact that... Sorry.
I need to caution you a little bit in making your references to ministers, that you refer to them by their proper title.
Oh, sure, sorry.
All right?
Of course, my apologies. The Minister of Public Administration, Madam President, was very careful to gloss over the fact that the building was...
You can't say that, Senator Ameen. Have a seat.
Well, I would use another phrase.
Yes, okay?
Thank you. Madam President, the Minister of Public Administration did not indicate the fact that in October 2017, the Ministry of Labour expressed an interest in the building, and in December of 2018, a full year later, the ministry withdrew interest. But no reason was provided by the minister as to why the ministry was no longer interested. The minister said that in April of 2018, the personnel department had indicated an interest. When in December the Ministry of Labour withdrew, the personnel department renewed interest, and within 2 months had managed to get all the various stages negotiated, assessed, resolved, and a cabinet note drafted and submitted at the very start of February. Madam President, what the Ministry of Labour could not do in over a year was achieved by the personnel department between December 27th, over the Christmas holidays, and we know what the public service works like over the Christmas holidays, and by February 7th, boom, contract, approvals, assessments, and so on. Madam President, the minister's statement boasted that the building was value for money and described it as a brand new A-class building. But Madam President, this raises more concerns in the eyes of the public, because all the funding for rental of this building, the funding for outfitting the building, clearly was not budgeted, which is a very clear indication that there was no plan to move into this building. The Ministry of Labour had indicated it had been trying for a year with no success. But alas, the great PNM managed to complete the negotiations and ensure that a building associated with the Attorney General was rented for millions of dollars, which would
$23 million over 3 years.
$23 million over a 3-year period, and it will continue.
That is corruption.
So, Madam President, if that is not corruption, I don't know what is, and the PNM seems to be proud of it.
Will the senator with the offending device please leave the chamber, and you can return in 5 minutes. Senator Ameen, I just want to caution you to tighten up your contribution. Yes. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, it pains me as a citizen of this country to see matters where you have millions of dollars just being pilfered. Well, I should try to use another term, but Madam President, how else do you describe it? It's so blatant, you know. But I want to. Yes.
To describe it in another way, please rephrase.
Yes.
Okay.
Madam President, it pains me to see money going to waste. It pains me to see a certain elite group benefiting. And it pains me to see what the reality is outside there on the ground in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, while we have that happening, you know what one thing I've been observing that I really want to touch on. I don't want to go into national security and the PNM's failure at increasing security and reducing crime in Trinidad and Tobago. But there's one aspect of crime fighting I want to touch on, and that is the social aspect of crime reduction. And I say the social aspect, Madam President, I believe that crime fighting, there are various aspects. There's the law enforcement, the hard part, which is men on the ground in boots and guns. There is the provision of opportunities for those in at-risk communities especially to improve themselves, to empower themselves, and to remove themselves from a life of crime. What I have observed, Madam President, is that the PNM has reduced the priority, government priority, and the spending with regards to those programs, particularly military-led programs that deal with youth empowerment and training. It seems, Madam President, I have seen in successive budgets, and I've spoken about it, that there is a reduction in the allocation to programs like the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, MILAT, and MIPAT. And here we have a request for a sum of 12 million to facilitate the continuation of the CCC program for the period July to September 2019. Madam President, this tells me again that the PNM has not placed a priority on these programs. Because of poor planning, they are asking for this additional money. Because they chose to cut the allocations in the budget, which we warned them against, you now have CCC coming up short. And I know for a fact that these programs have been deprived of funding for a lot of their activity during the financial year. And you have reached to the stage now where you realize water more than flour, and you need an additional $12 million. Madam President, I want to ask this government, even now, those programs that particularly benefit the at-risk youth, that provide empowerment, that provide training, that you not cut on those programs, that you ensure that those programs continue to remain active and viable. I don't recall any minister accounting for how many persons are currently enrolled in the CCC over the last few years, 2017, 2018, 2019. We don't know if this 12 million is based on an increase in enrollment, but certainly we know that the budgeted figure was reduced in the 2019 estimates of expenditure, and it was actually less than what was given in 2018, only to be increased even higher in the 2019 variation before the House at present. So I have concerns about that, and I want to tell you that if you have proper planning, that will not take place. I want to move now, Madam President, to education. It is my belief that spending on education is not just spending, it is an investment. Whether it is spending by a government or by a family, spending on education is an investment. Kofi Annan said that education is the premise of progress in every society, in every family. And I fully support that. I fully agree with that, Madam President. My areas of concern that I expressed in the budget debate.
5 more minutes.
Right. My areas of concern that I expressed in the budget debate had to do with the cut and reduction in security, especially for schools in the at-risk area, the cut in allocation for auxiliary and support staff, including guidance officers, social officers, counselors, the repair and maintenance of schools, the incomplete schools under construction that was started by the People's Partnership Government, many of them which are 75, 80, and 90% complete, that this government has failed to bring to completion in their 4 years in office. Madam President, the Minister of Education is either misinformed or deliberately misleading the public when the minister indicated
Ameen, you can't say that. please rephrase. Okay?
Okay, well, Madam President, the minister seems to be uninformed. It might be better if I just say that, because I don't want to ascribe, you know. Well, Madam President, the minister seems to be very uninformed about what is taking place. I saw no change in allocation to pay contractors who were unpaid since the change in government. This government has refused to pay contractors who started working on several schools. Because of that, the work has stopped, and there are many schools that are just closed up. Some of them have been vandalized. Many of them are overgrown in bushes. And it would not take much for the government to allow these contractors to finish these schools. In fact, every day that you leave those schools unattended, it will cost the government more. You have failed in this bill, Madam President. The government has failed to bring any allocation to deal with those schools. The government has also been indicating that they're not aware of the 106 schools built by the People's Partnership Government. I want to put those 106 schools on record, but I know I only have 5 more minutes. But I want to tell you that those 106 schools constructed under the People's Partnership Government from 2010 to 2015 could withstand all scrutiny, any audit, nationally and internationally. And under the leadership of Kamla Persad-Bissessar as Prime Minister, this country stood proud of its school construction achievements. Madam President, I want to continue to plead the Ministry of Education in several areas. It's being poorly managed, it's being understaffed, it's being under-resourced, and the suppression of spending is not a saving. The suppression of spending seems to be this government's method to deal with, to try to indicate to us that they have savings. Madam President, many of their programs continue to be pie in the sky, before I close, I want to mention the Minister of Trade spoke about a fashion program where people will be trained in fashion and tailoring and so on. Madam President, the minister is encouraging people to spend their money to attend to this program. These programs are not accredited. The government needs to tell people that. So while the government is spending millions of dollars, the people who all participate will get a certificate that may not even be worth the paper it is printed on. So you cannot bring an unaccredited program to the nation as a solution. Madam President, that is incompetence. That is another failure. And you are continuing to sell dreams to people in this country. And you will see the result come general election 2020. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Seepersad.
Thank you, Madam President, for the opportunity to contribute to the bill on the appropriation, the financial year 2019, Act 2018, number 16 of 2018. Madam President, with respect to the macroeconomic statistics presented, if 50% of the data is correct, I can conclude that the economy is moving in a positive direction, and credit must be given accordingly. International financial institutions have also confirmed that this is so. Nevertheless, statistics are a snapshot at a specific point in time, and as the Minister of Finance pointed out, we are not insulated from the vagaries of international events which can and will affect us. Therefore, prudent management of the economy is not debatable. Now, the Minister of Finance indicated that for the first half of the fiscal year, expenditure was contained by $2.55 billion. Whether this is prudent management or faulty budgeting and execution, it is not clear. We can still agree that the economy is not completely out of the woods, since economic growth and sustainability continues to be tied to the energy sector. This is despite the underlying uncertainties with respect to fluctuating prices and diminishing supplies. Madam President, the list of indebtedness to various financial institutions is pretty long. In December 2018, the central bank recorded the net public sector debt of $98.9 billion, which represents 62.2% of the GDP. The government has acquired a $200 million loan to develop roads and pledged to issue a $1 billion housing bond and settle all VAT refunds. The VAT refunds amount to $4.6 billion. The government has had to borrow to acquire ferries for Tobago, service the existing debt, the number one, and that is a number one repayment, and settle public sector contracts, of which $5 billion is to pay public servants. During the first 3 months of the 2018-2019 financial year, the government borrowed approximately $1.7 billion from the domestic capital market to finance the closure of Petrotrin and to provide budgetary support. The loan of $1.7 billion was 2 bonds underwritten by First Citizens Bank. Petrotrin also contracted short-term loans of $197.3 million US, financed by Scotia Trust, $50 million, FCB, $125 million, Republic Bank, $22.3 million. All this is US dollars. The government has a primary fiscal deficit going back many years. This means that the country is in deficit even before the interest on existing debt is paid. We're incurring more debt to pay interest on existing debt. Is this advisable? Further borrowing, of course, only exacerbates the problem. Also, Madam President, I've been unable to find any plan to reduce the deficit and to reduce indebtedness. There's also uncertainty about the future of the Atlantic LNG Train 1, which received a 20-year tax holiday when it began operations in March 1999. BP has said it recently had disappointing results from 2 infill drilling programs, and while these fields are still producing, BP has had to revise its production forecast for 2020 and 2021. These volumes would have been used to supply gas under a new sales agreement, which is not yet signed, between BPTT and Atlantic for Train 1. Therefore, there will be challenges to BPTT's gas supply to Train 1 after 2019. Madam President, for BPTT, this would mean a 20% drop in production and a 12% decline in Trinidad and Tobago's natural gas production. It's also likely to lead to a fall in crude oil output because there will be less condensate from the country's 3rd largest oil producer, and it will reduce Atlantic LNG's production to less than 70% of its capacity. This means a loss of revenue of hundreds of millions of dollars for the government in taxes from the production of oil and gas and the export of LNG. This can put any economic recovery at risk, since it's expected that increased natural gas production will be the primary driver of our economic growth. Madam President, this will hurt TTNGL. Phoenix gas processors will have fewer liquids to process because of the reduction in the volume of gas available for processing. It will also further damage Trinidad and Tobago's confidence in the downstream energy sector. So what are the basic requirements for every citizen? Food, shelter, clean air, health, safety, water, energy, to name a few. These needs must be addressed in a meaningful way. Building more roads to reduce the traffic congestion is a plaster, not a long-term solution. The road network we now have is in dire need of repair and maintenance. Improved public transport will reduce the volume of traffic, air pollution, and the frequency of road repairs and maintenance. Again, building more facilities to care for sick people is costlier in the long run than a program of education and facilities to engender healthy habits. Another irony, Madam President, is that in this day and age, we are still subsidizing truck-borne water. My point, I believe, is clear. And while we continue to rely primarily on the energy sector for revenue inflows, we may not be able to extricate ourselves from this quagmire. Diversifying the economy is on the lips of many people, but the concept needs to be activated and implemented in a meaningful way. Madam President, one further point. The EU Code of Conduct was a matter not dealt with by the Minister of Finance. The European Union Code of Conduct Group's agenda of curtailing harmful tax practices within the Caribbean region remains a significant issue for Trinidad and Tobago. It is expected that at the EU Finance Ministers meeting in May 2019, Aruba, Bermuda, and Barbados will be removed from the EU Code of Conduct list of non-cooperative jurisdictions. Trinidad and Tobago, however, is expected to remain on the list because of non-compliance with the EU standards in transparency and exchange of information for tax purposes, and for failing to address the tax practices under the Free Zones Act. The impact of Trinidad and Tobago's continued inclusion on the list of non-cooperative jurisdictions is that the country could be behest with adverse tax measures by individual EU member states, as well as reduced funding and guarantees from institutions within the European Union. Without a clear solution to adhering to the EU Code of Conduct, Trinidad and Tobago's continued non-compliance is expected to have an impact on business in the country. Finally, Madam President, the situational analysis points to revenue decreasing at an increasing rate and expenditures increasing at an increasing rate. As the gap widens, the debt burden becomes heavier on citizens now and in the future. In my view, this is an untenable situation. Thank you, Madam President.
Energy industries.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I thank you for allowing me to join this debate on the Supplemental Appropriation Bill that was ably presented in the House of Representatives by the Honorable Minister of Finance, and now equally ably presented by the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, my fellow Senator, Senator Alison West, Minister in the Ministry of Finance. Madam President, the key message of this statement, I think, could be capsuled, and I quote from the Minister of Finance's speech in the House. The first quarter of 2018, we moved from negative to 0.9% positive for the first time in many years. The second quarter, 2.1%. And the third quarter, 1.5%. 3 quarters of economic growth, by any economic definition, is economic recovery. That's the theory of economics. So what spin are you trying to put on this? No good news in this country is taken well by the UNC.
That's a fact.
So I'll just read some other key economic parameters. A revised growth projection of 0.9% by the World Bank for 2019. They were saying negative growth again. Headline inflation as of March 2019, 1.5%. They say that they have no liquidity in the economy. This economy has so much liquidity it's unfunded.
That's right.
Inflation headline, 1.5%. Actual collection of non-oil revenue of 17.795 million for the period October 2018 to March 2019, compared to 17,117, which is 17.1 billion for the corresponding period, more than we collected last year. Oil and gas taxes excluding royalties, up by 672 million year on year for the first 6 months of fiscal 2018. royalty collection for the period October 2018 to March 2019 of 1,484 million or 1.48 billion as compared to 2.3 billion for the entire fiscal year. And it's only half. And we collected 1.4 already. So you're looking at 3, possibly 3 point something. Fiscal deficit relative to GDP of 3.1% based on mid-year estimates as compared to 3.95% for fiscal 2018. So your fiscal deficit is reducing. Yeah. As at March 2019, that's 2 months ago, net public sector debt to GDP ratio was 61.7%, which is well within international standard. Jamaica is over 100%. Barbados is over 120%, I think.
Yep.
As at April 26, 2019, the net official foreign reserves was US 7.35 billion, which covers 8.3 months of imports. 8.3 months import cover. It's probably one of the best figures in the third world. Mm-hmm. Barbados probably have 4 weeks, if so many. The net asset value of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund as at April 26, 2019 was $6.085 billion US dollars. Financial year-to-date return of 2.1%. Most investments in the United States is 1 to 2%. Just have a positive return in this type of global economy is great news.
Global slowdown.
All this is indicative of the positive attributes of the economy. But I will deal with the growth, because the growth is largely driven by the energy sector, and in particular, natural gas production. Some new dynamics have been playing over the last couple of days about BP and trade war and all this type of drama. I will deal with that comprehensively today during my presentation. But this debate really didn't have much substance from the other side. I almost didn't have any notes to take for both Senator Mark and Senator Ameen. But I wouldn't let them get away scot-free by the same token. Senator Ameen mentioned how they settled so many outstanding labor negotiations. Ask Ansel Roger of the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. Well, didn't settle one with the Oilfield Workers Trade Union because of spite, because they left the partnership. Good? Because of spite from the...
And please, could I have some decorum while the minister is making his presentation? Continue, Minister.
Your legacy in settling industrial disputes was weeks before you demitted office. You settled an outstanding back pay to the oilfield work arm, to the Public Service Association for a whopping $5 billion, monies which you did not have and could not raise. It was left to the PNM to honor that commitment. We paid it in 2 tranches from borrowed money, which obviously should not have been a priority expenditure at the time. But we honor the contracts and we honor the commitment of previous government, because government is a continuous process.
We don't understand that.
Let me just respond to 2 statements by Senator Mark, because he was a little unimpressive today.
Very.
Normally he does rant and rave and create some excitement, albeit not on facts, but he still creates excitement. Today, he lacked neither fact nor excitement.
I wish he was here to hear that.
He spoke about housing in Moruga and in Toko Sandigrandi. Social surveys. Madam President, through you, the social surveys have shown that the two constituencies that has the highest level of poverty in Trinidad and Tobago is Moruga Tableland and Toko Sandigrandi. Moruga Tableland is a marginal seat, we know that. Toko Sandigrandi is not. I was a member of parliament for Moruga Tableland. I know the poverty. I had a program there called Fix Your Fund Step. Because anytime you walk in the constituency, you have to be balancing to go up a broken front step because you could fall down. Today, through innovation, this housing program has won an international award. You're creating a built, the people put in sweat equity, and the government is building a flat 2-bedroom house for $120,000. And that has been successfully executed in Samuel Cooper.
Yes.
Okay. You know who lives in Samuel Cooper? The descendants of Americans. The entire village are descendants of Americans. And if you saw where they were living, it's squalor. This is not PNM, it's not UNC. It is dealing with poverty in Trinidad and Tobago. The same thing in Toko Sandigrandi. You go to parts of Valencia, the parts of Matura, where Toko Sandigrandi has the most squatters in Trinidad. People don't squat because they're wicked. People squat because they probably have no alternative. And the squatter regularization program is going well, and we have put that concept that was developed in Moruga Tableland into Toko Sandigrandi, the train line in San Fernando West, and it will be rolling it out to various depressed and deprived communities in Trinidad and Tobago. What is so wrong with that? And finally, but I will leave that later on, but I just want to mention it here. Senator Mark spoke about no direct foreign investment. I will quote from the BP's president in an interview this morning on CNC3. Most people would have seen it. Everybody gong-ho on this train, one matter. She was asked by Hema Ramkisoon, the moderator, is BP making a profit in Trinidad and Tobago? And she said, yes, it is making a profit, but it is experiencing negative cash flow. And you know why it is experiencing negative cash flow? BP's gross revenue per annum goes into billions of TT dollars. But you know why they're in a negative cash flow position? Because the magnitude of their investments. Hundreds of millions of US dollars. When the Prime Minister came back from Houston, BP and Shell and EOG committed to $10 billion US investment in the upstream energy sector over the next 5 years. BHP is drilling. Shell, I'll deal with all that. Shell is drilling. BP is drilling. It costs a pound and a crown to drill, especially in the offshore deep water. So direct foreign investment is here. So let me now deal with the energy sector, and in particular, the gas industry. Madam President, the PNM, which I was proud to chair for 10 years, could boast about the creation of energy policy in this country. If it's one area we have not failed, one iota, is in the energy sector.
People are learning from us.
And I'll just quote a few examples. It is the PNM that introduced the petroleum profit tax. Talking to Senator Vera now. prior to Act number 22 of 1974, which was introduced by Dr. Williams, oil companies paid corporation tax, which was 30%. Petroleum positive tax is 55%. You could imagine the amount of additional revenue this country generated from that. Was he afraid to do it? He analyzed the situation, it is done, and now it's par for the course that oil companies pay petroleum profit tax of 55%, way above corporation tax because it's a special industry that depletes our wasting asset. Act number 5 of 1981, the supplemental petroleum tax. And that came out after the Arab oil embargo. Because in 1974-75, oil price raised from $6 to $36 a barrel. 400, 500% increase in a short period of time. The oil companies were experiencing windfall profits. Not because of anything they did, it was because of the international climate. Those days there was a guy in Saudi called Sheikh Yamani. So when Sheikh Yamani sneezed, the oil price raised. Dr. Williams, probably one of his last acts before he died, in 1981, was to introduce the petroleum profit tax, supplemental petroleum tax. Even our own current Minister of Finance, for years, we said royalty on gas was 1.7 TT cents per MCF, which was effectively no royalties. He was brave enough to introduce a 12.5% royalty on natural gas. For the first time, I was in the Manning cabinet and he couldn't do it because there were consequences from the oil companies. And Minister Imbut and the Prime Minister saw it fit to do that. To date, that has raised over $3 billion in revenue additional in calendar year 2018, because it became effective on the 1st of January 2018. It is the PNM that conceptualized the monetization of the gas resources of Trinidad and Tobago, the creation and the construction of Point Lisas, the entrance into LNG. Mr. Manning was ostracized. And you know, the same day for Borrow Day was the 20th anniversary of the first shipment of LNG from Train 1. I unveiled a plaque with the chairman of Atlantic. I know what the plaque had on it? To commission the first shipment by John Humphrey, acting Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Conceptualized, built, accomplished by a PNM government under Manning, and John Humphrey had the opportunity to sail the first shipment. That is how the energy sector works. It matters not to in government. Energy policy is supposed to be continuous and seamless. And that is what we strive to do. It is the PNM that is now drifting away from the exploration and production license to the production sharing contract, which is fundamentally superior in terms of returns to Trinidad and Tobago. Let me come closer to the present. Under then Prime Minister Manning, he formed something called the Cabinet Standing Committee on Energy. It was chaired by the Prime Minister. Because the thinking then was that energy policy is so fundamental to the future of Trinidad and Tobago that it couldn't be left to one minister. I was in the Manning cabinet at the time. My colleague Eric Williams was the energy minister. And I told him it's the worst minister to be in energy because you have no independence, because you're always under the watchful eyes of the Standing Committee of Energy. I served on that Standing Committee. So did Dr. Rowley, as the then Minister of Planning. Both of us are geologists, we know this. And I saw how a well-functioning committee worked. Also on that committee was Dr. Lenny Sate, all the chairmen of state enterprises in the energy sector, and other energy experts, including Professor Julian. Lo and behold, the UNC came in, and all things turned haywire. Yeah, Pap killed Kitty. The Standing Committee of Energy was in fact established, chaired by the then Prime Minister, member for Siparia, Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa. Madam President, through you, for 5 years and 3 months, I have checked the records of the minutes. The then Prime Minister did not attend a single meeting. If that is not dereliction of duty, I say today without fear of contradiction, and Dr. Rowley honors that, the two most important committees, well, three, the Prime Minister chairs, he's the chairman of the cabinet, then he's possibly second, he's head of the National Security Council, and thirdly, the chairman of the Standing Committee of Energy. I can tell you today, to you, Madam President, Dr. Rowley, I am a member of the Standing Committee of Energy, obviously. There has never been a meeting of the Standing Committee of Energy, and it's kept regularly, that Dr. Rowley did not personally chair. So here we have a Prime Minister who didn't attend a single meeting, so she knew what was going on. It was chaired sometimes by the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Larry Hawaii, and sometimes I think by Minister of Energy, Kevin Ramnarine. Madam President, it was the one eye leading the blind. And I say that without fear of contradiction. That Standing Committee was the one eye leading the blind. I won't tell you who had the one eye and who were blind. And that's why everything went haywire. And here what we did. When Dr. Rowley and the PNM won the election, the first thing he did was re-establish with some level of integrity the Standing Committee of Energy, chaired by him, including myself, and I said this without fear of contradiction, the Minister of Finance, Senator Stuart Young, Minister Stuart Young, and a couple other senior ministers. Never before, possibly in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, has a cabinet existed as today, with so much in-house expertise on the energy sector. We know what we are doing. And I can say without fear of contradiction, if I am out of the country, Dr. Rowley could act for me, I can tell you he's the boss. Colin Imbut acts for me sometime. Stuart Young acts for me sometime. And there are other people who are capable of doing it. And that's the depth of knowledge that we have within the PNM. Well, I'll speak about Minister Young in a while. What we met when we took over in 2015, early 2016, decline in gas production. 2016 gas production averaged 3.3 BCF per day. Right now it's 3.9. A 600 million cubic feet more. Expired upstream and downstream contracts. The NGC facing claims of $4 billion TT dollars. And you do not renew a gas contract today for tomorrow. Has to be renewed near in advance. 2 years, 3 years in advance. All that the UNC did nothing, you know, because was the one eye leading the blind. And if a fly go in the one eye that you're seeing in, trouble for you, you know. Significantly declining revenues. We were saddled with lower oil and gas prices. We'll deal with this one a little later on. I hope I have enough time. More than generous tax concession given by the UNC. And more than generous is an understatement, you know. And finally, and probably most importantly, significant revenue leakage, especially from the trading of LNG. What did the Prime Minister do? The first matter he had to sort out was the upstream contracts. He went to Houston. Mr. Young accompanied. I was sick at the time. He didn't sign a deal with BP and EOG. He brokered the facilitation because the talks were deadlocked. Eventually, NGC, BP, and EOG signed a gas supply agreement. Because of that, that's when they made the commitment for the $10 billion US investment over the next 5 years. And probably the most significant thing he has done in this term was to attempt to deal with the leakage of revenue on something called Spotlight on Energy, which was held at the Hyatt. That was a seminal seminar, to use a pun. For the first time, as a government, we came to the national community and the international press and the world and say, hey guys, Trinidad has been shortchanged by the international oil companies. We make no apologies for that, because it was in fact happening. The Prime Minister, myself, a couple other people delivered addresses at the seminar. Oh gosh, trouble now. First thing the UNC say, you're running foreign investors. Remember that? The Trinidad Energy Chamber said you have to honor the sanctity of the contracts. We know that. Even the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, who we invited to the Spotlight, didn't turn up. And don't talk about the commentators. Charrise Seepersad, B-Chan. I will Surgeon Kevin Ramnarain. And I will deal with them later on if I have time. I know how much time you're giving me, you know, Madam President. And the famous and infamous Mariano Borg, the man who knows everything. Well, one thing I could tell you again as a 10-year chairman of the PNM, Mariano Borg claims he has a PNM card, but he does not speak in any form or fashion for the People's National Movement. So coming out of the seminar, coming out of the Spotlight on Energy, two things happened. We established, the Prime Minister established, telegraphed to BP and Shell in particular. This is where we're going. He formed what we call an empowered negotiation team, which I chaired, or I should say co-chaired, with Minister Young. We had industry experts, and more importantly, we engaged two internationally reputable consultants. White & Case, the world's #1 legal law firm out in New York, and Putin & Partners, the company that did the gas master plan, and brought to our attention the leakage of revenue. We had Wendell Motley, ORTT, most deserving, and a couple other key people. Never before, and I say this without fear of contradiction, has a government been so prepared to enter into negotiation with international oil companies in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. We've concluded the first rounds of negotiation with BP. Within weeks, we will be concluding with Shell. When the Prime Minister went to Showground in 2018 or 2017, somewhere there, he met with the leaders of BP and Shell. And he told them, and I was at the meeting, he told them in no uncertain terms, you are making a hefty profit in Trinidad and Tobago. And your shareholders are pleased, but my shareholders are not pleased. And we have to coexist on mutually agreeable terms if this has to be a long-term relationship. So said, so done. Companies accepted, and I must report today that these negotiations are going extremely well. But the Prime Minister, as leader of the Cabinet and as leader of the Standing Committee on Energy, leads from the front. He led in Houston. He led in London. He led at the Hyatt on the spotlight of energy. And he's going to take the lead again at the end of this month, when we go back to The Hague to meet with Shell, when we go back to London to meet with BP, and then we fly across to Houston to meet with EOG and some of the other companies. That's what leadership is about. Not flying in helicopter from south to north.
Not seeing people in your duster.
Madam President, if there has been prudent leadership in any sector of this economy, it has been in the energy sector. And today I want to publicly thank and congratulate my leader, who has supervised me very well for this period, so that today, together with him and other ministers, in particular Minister Young and Minister Inwood, I think we are starting to see the results of our very, very hard work. I thank all the technocrats, the executive at the NGC, the consultants. I mean, I don't want to say too much, but I mean, White and Case has been so impressive. I wonder why we didn't think that way before. With regards to the negotiation, I'll speak on one aspect of it, which is a new Train 1 pricing structure. And both Senator Seepersad and Senator Devanarine spoke about gas and gas prices. Senator Devanarine in particular about the gas price. The gas price is not a very simple issue. We quote our price in our budget, but it's not a linear relationship. Gas prices are very complex. Most of our contracts are based on Henry Hub and Lake Charles, which are no longer even gas importing areas. They are now gas exporting areas for LNG. So that reference is obsolete. We have established a price for Train 1, which I will give the basic formula. It is 1/3 Brent, which is based on high-value crude, 1/3 JKD, which is the most lucrative market in the world. JKD stands for the Japan, Korea, Eastern market, which includes China. And 1/3 NBP, which is a European reference. So it's a basket. Because we quote in $3 per MMBTU for gas here. But the traders who take the cargoes from Point 14 switch cargoes in the ocean. And that very gas that we pay in Henry Hub prices for goes to China and sells at $8 and $10 per MMBTU. But They have broken no law yet. They tell you that around the negotiating table. So that is why we have to tighten up on the system. And we were in a tenacious position where we have to honor the contracts. But we have to bring to them that while sensu stricto the contract says that, there's something called fairness. And when international oil companies deal with sovereign states, there's a UN charter on that somebody has to give way. Luckily, they have, and this is the new formula, which will be the basis for the pricing of LNG as we continue when contracts expire, when licenses and production sharing contracts expire. That is the formula we're working on when we go into the black box model for Atlantic to integrate all the trains into a unified train. So, Madam President, tell me how much time I have again?
Not until 3:44.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thanks. So let me get into a couple things specific. The lowest natural gas production we've had for years was in 2016. We averaged 3.3 BCF. We averaged 3.36 BCF in 2017. I will deal with the BP issue just now, but I asked the question. When we were producing 3.3 and 3.6, wasn't the 4 trains operational? In 2018, we averaged 3.63. In 2019, we expected to average 3.81. But I just want to quote you some monthly figures. In January, we produced 3.36 BCF per day. In February, we reached a staggering 3.954.
Minister, you have 5 more minutes.
5 more.
5 more.
Okay. And then 3.85. And the story goes on. The 2017 Ryder Scott reserves audit indicated for the first time since 2014, we have a year-on-year increase in proven reserves. It means we were finding more gas than we were using. Then we have all these series of projects that will come on stream. Angeline, Starfish and Dolphin, Cassia Compression, Matapal, Colibri, Barracuda. Then there's a deepwater exploration, very successful to date. BHP has found 3 wells with gas. They're quantifying the reserves. Again, that was initiative of the Prime Minister. He didn't go to Australia for Austral alone, you know. He went and he met BHP leaders. And today BHP has given up assets in the United States, but they have kept Trinidad. And as I speak, Madam President, BHP is only drilling deepwater wells in 2 places on Earth, the Gulf of Mexico and Trinidad and Tobago, because the basin is prospective. We will have hiccups here and there, but it is prospective. And finally, the BP dry hole, I wanted to spend some more time on that. Today, the whole story was told by BP's president in an interview out of Houston. There was no 4 dry holes. As Minister Imbert said, which is information the Ministry of Energy gave to him. There was 1 dry hole and 1 well that didn't come up to the expectation that it was given. However, BP is forecasting a 200 million cubic feet per day deficit. I met with BP on Tuesday, that's yesterday, a major technical session with all the geologists, geophysicists, reservoir petroleum engineers, and their management. And I asked for a detailed presentation as to what happened. They showed it to me. I'm a geologist. My field is petroleum geology. I understood what it was to take, where they failed and why they failed. They need some time to reevaluate before they continue the program. And I'm very confident, after we meet with them in London, and after I told them, look for alternatives to see if they can make up the deficit outside of the disappointment of those few wells, I think we will be in a better place. And Mrs. Fitzpatrick did say on the television this morning that all BP is saying that at this point in time, they cannot sign a new gas supply contract for Train 1. She didn't say what will happen to Train 1, whether it will be mothballed, whether it will be decommissioned or what. That's a matter for these Train 1 shareholders. But I am confident that this hiccup, based on the macro gas situation that I have already explained, we will find a solution. We have a secured supply for probably as far as the first quarter of 2020. So, Madam President, I hope I have put to rest some of the misinformation that is in the public domain. There is a challenge, but it's not an insurmountable challenge. The country's leadership is well seized of the matter. We have the expertise to deal with it. We're dealing with it at the highest level. BP, Shell, and they are some of the best technologically driven oil companies in the world. And if they can't find solution, who will? But they must find solution in conjunction with the government, and the government is willing to support and to make Trinidad and Tobago feel better. It's about feeling good, you know. Because those who strive on negativity could never be happy. Because it is a psyche that you put to the people, especially during an election time. True. And Trinidad and Tobago, a lot of the people in this country, it matters not to them whether PNM or UNC in power, you know. They want to see a better country. And if on election day, they feel that they can see a better country under the PNM, which they will vote for the People's National Movement. I thank you, Madam President.
Anita Haynes.
Thank you, Madam President, for recognizing me as I join in this debate on what is commonly known as our mid-year review. I always like to speak after the Minister of Energy. I think he sets up my contribution well and allows me to get a lot of context, because the Minister of Energy always reminds us, and I'm grateful for that the PNM has been in power in this country the longest, and that is 42 out of the 57 years. Because if you listen to the rest of them, you would think the history of Trinidad and Tobago started 2010 to 2015, and then now. And so therefore, anything that happened that went wrong in this country, they want to blame the Kamala Persad-Bissessar administration. But the Minister of Energy gives us a lot of context and historical data, and I am very glad that he brought up that he was once the representative for Moruga, because I'll touch on that later on, and I'll ensure that I have time to touch on that. But as the minister ended, he spoke about the negativity, and it is a sentiment echoed that he echoed from the Minister of Finance earlier today, speaking that people are trying to put negative energy into the conversation. And I think the more that they buckle down and commit to that narrative, that the facts are that the country is doing better, and that they give us all of these numbers to say this is why you're doing better, and ignore the issues plaguing citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, the issues of unemployment, of a lack of access to basic necessities, it just makes them look that much more out of touch with the reality that citizens face. And before I get into the substance, as the Minister of Energy was speaking, the Newsday published an article by Dr. Gabriel Hussein entitled "Eat Cake from Calm." Not everybody that speaks out is a UNC, you know, because if that's the case, we're winning by a big landslide, right? So the article, and I'm quoting here, and it's published today in the Newsday, written by Dr. Hussein. The Minister of Finance, Colm Imbert, might as well have said, "Let them eat cake." This phrase historically symbolized the disregard for the struggling masses, catching to afford basic necessities by suggesting more expensive alternatives out of reach, except for the rich. It is his buoyancy in the face of the obvious, everyday economic challenge that smacks with disdain. Madam President, that's how I intended to start, The more the government ministers come here and tell us the economy is growing, look, we're doing well, look at these numbers, and they ignore the everyday challenges facing citizens, it reeks with disdain for the people of this country. Common sense, the article goes on to say, Madam President, common sense tells us that unemployment has significantly risen, and it has led to a contraction across the economy. Statistics cannot disagree with common sense when you haven't collected unemployment data since the end of 2017. Madam President, this isn't the UNC. These are people who live in Trinidad and Tobago, who interact and engage with students, because Dr. Hussein is a teacher, a professor, who is telling the government, listen, the more you commit to this narrative that people are doing well, despite the everyday challenges that we're seeing, it reeks with disdain. Madam President, you're talking about whenever we have a budget or a mid-year review, that's the debate that garners the most attention. And it's because it speaks directly to the lives of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, to our bread and butter issues, and we're talking about our present and we're talking about our future. You don't hear anything about the future from this government. You only hear about the past and what happened in the past, and that they're trying now to say, look, we've done our best right now, but there's no hope for the future. They don't actually give you anything that they intend to do, any projected numbers, any projected figures. But while people are paying attention, Madam President, I have structured my contribution here today to speak to a number of key groups who would be affected by the variation and supplementation here today. All right, before I get to that, I forgot that I had to respond to the Minister of Trade. The Minister of Trade, I thought, quite ironically, said that we don't come here and discuss our plans with them. I don't know if the Minister saw the contribution of the Leader of the Opposition in the House, but the Leader of the Opposition went as far as to bring the UNC's Economic Transformation Master Plan 2020 to 2025, walk with a hard copy to the House and read out some of it. So again, and I'd like to invite the Minister of Trade. If you want to talk our plans with us and you want to hear more, we are in Grandy on Monday for our Monday night forum. You're welcome. Welcome to join us. You'll hear. I remember in the run-up to the 2015 election, we had a countdown clock as we were waiting for the PNM to say what their plan for the development of Trinidad and Tobago would be. The countdown clock was running up until the election. It is my respectful view that we could still keep that clock running. After all the 4 years of government, they still have not presented a plan, and they can't present an achievement because there was no plan in the first place. And you see, I want us to cast our minds back just a little bit to 2018, the year of the turnaround. I don't know if you all remember that, but it was the year of the I can see clearly now, and that the country has turned around. And I called it then political fiction. And 1 year later, that has proven to be correct. Because when you hear the word turnaround, a word that has been conspicuously absent from today's debate, the new word is stabilize. You know what they're doing, Madam President? Is they're lowering expectations. You see that turnaround thing? Don't get too glad. Don't get too excited. What we're talking about now is stabilize. Because you see, Madam President, they promised the turnaround last year in the mid-year review. And by the time we came to the budget, they had shut down Petrotrin and put a number of thousands of people on the breadline. And if that's their definition of turnaround, I can see why they've stopped using the word this year. But the PNM, Madam President, is right on target, I think. Not on target with delivery, not on target with getting goods and services to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, but very much on target with the same old, tired, and quite frankly, very predictable politicking. If I did not know, Madam President, that this was the year before an election year, I could tell from the nature of the spending the government is willing to engage in now. And the commitment to this positive, cheery outlook, these rose-colored glasses, and that reality. And you know, Madam President, I have a number of friends in the political science arena of academics. And I said, as we would discuss it, that it could not be that the PNM really thought in 2019, 2020, that you can starve and stifle our population for 4 years and come in the last year with goodies and that people would believe that. But it looks like that is exactly what they think would work. That is and I find that, I mean, I cannot believe that you're going to commit to your 1950s, 1960s, 1980s politicking in 2020 and think it would work. And you are sorely, sorely mistaken. Huh? I'd like to speak firstly, Madam President, to a group of people called the millennials. The Minister in the Ministry of Finance had brought the millennials into a debate a little while ago, sometime earlier this year, where she said that we didn't like, and I am a millennial because the age group is, it gets to 35, and I'm not yet 35, and so I am in that millennial age group, and she said that we don't like sustainable employment. We prefer transitional employment because we like to move around. I don't know that any of that is actually true. But I want to speak to the millennials right now, because before us, Madam President, we're seeing that the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development is getting an additional $39 million. And for what? It is for the OJT program. And I, like my colleague, Senator Ameen, genuinely wish the Minister of Labor was here to really give us an account for this money. I also know that there are thousands of persons who were waiting to hear from her, the same Petrotrin workers, so her silence has been very disheartening. But, Madam President, I want to talk about this allocation, and I want to talk directly to the millennials. Because what is the OJT program? According to its website, the OJT program is supposed to be a pre-employment program which offers participants between the ages of 16 to 35 an induction into the world of work and focuses on their acquisition of practical occupational skills and experiences within organizations. So pre-employment. Senator Ameen, I think, quite ably demonstrated, and as did other senators before me, that there's a problem of unemployment in this country. Senator Mark spoke about underemployment. But, Madam President, when we, as a responsible opposition, keep saying to the government, get your act together, put interventions in place, we have an unemployment problem in this country. We are told we are alarmists. I think they'll start to call us dramatic. We are negative. We are speaking for people who simply want the dignity of being able to earn a living, you know, Madam President. And I think that the government, and which they meet these interventions with so much disdain and disregard because they can't understand the concept of sustainable employment and what that means to the average everyday citizen, the ability to get up in the morning, pack your bag, go to work, earn your living. And you know, now we have 1 year before an election. You say to that age group, 16 to 35, we haven't put anything in place for sustainable employment for you. You are graduating. You have done all the right things. You went to school, you studied your work, you're graduating from whether it be high school, A-levels, university, you are coming out, and with the changes they've made to GATE, not everyone can access tertiary education right now, so some of them would have to go into the world of work. And you're saying to them, here's what we'll do for you. Hold on 2 years. We're going to give the Ministry of Labor, and I think by now we have to drop this small enterprise development from the name of that, from the title of that ministry, because I can't recall, there's no small enterprise development going on in Trinidad and Tobago right now. People are not comfortable and confident to take risks, so there's no small enterprise development, so I think we could safely drop that from the title of this ministry. But Madam President, so you are looking at the young people, the future of this nation, and you are saying to them, this is what the PNM has to offer you. We will put $39+ million now extra for the Ministry of Labor, and all that you deserve is 2 years pre-employment, and figure yourself out after that, because there's no overarching policy directing this OJT program, and where, despite what they're saying that you're going to go into fields, that Madam President, that is so disconnected from the reality facing Trinidad and Tobago. Right now, I have people calling me. I have people who I went to school with, people with master's degrees who are unemployed in this country right now. And yes, you'll take the OJT and you'll do the 2 years, and you're doing clerical work. You are doing anything that you get to do at this point in time, you are doing it. But to say to the citizens of this country, Madam President, to say to them that this is what the government is doing for you, you need to be grateful, I think it's quite frankly insulting, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago should reject it outright. You see, Madam President, this $39+ million was not followed by or preceded by any policy on job creation. Senator Dave Norine asked a question here today, a question I have also been asking many times. Is there any conversation between the Ministry of Education and this OJT program? Are we trying to align our developmental goals in any way? Are we focusing youth employment? Are we focusing our spend on education plus our spend on labor? Are we doing any of these things? Or are we simply throwing money at problems and hoping that it will sort itself out eventually? And this, you know, Madam President, it is a government that is always engaged in simple arithmetic and no architecture, no developmental strategy. So you put little bits of money here, there, and there, and you patch up a problem here, you patch up a problem there, and you hope for the best. And I am, like I said, I am grateful I went after the Minister of Energy, who reminded us that the PNM has been in charge of this country for the majority of time since our independence. So the systems that I am talking about, the systematic failures that we are seeing in the country, has to lie at their feet, Madam President. And I want to talk about goal number 8 of the Agenda for Sustainable Development presented by the International Labour Organization, titled Decent Work and Economic Growth. Madam President, this speaks about promoting inclusive and sustainable economic growth by looking at employment and decent work for all. And I wanted to raise this point, Madam President, because it is a principle, a core principle of the United National Congress to say that all of us must share in progress, and decent work and access to decent employment is a central tenet of that. And you know, Madam President, you can hear when Mrs. Seepersad said that we would create 50,000 jobs in 5 years. That was met by ridicule from the government, laughter as usual. But I didn't expect anything different, because from a government that can't create a single job, that is hemorrhaging jobs, of course you can't understand how it's possible to create 50,000 jobs. We don't expect you to know that because you're not doing it now. Madam President, Mr. Vice President, do you know that this government has failed to put job creation at the heart of any of their policy decisions or developmental plans? So you get, and also during the period, the second quarter of 2015, which was the end of the last full quarter of the People's Partnership Administration led by Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, to the end of 2017, the end of the third quarter of 2017, you were looking at some 18,800 young persons between the ages of 20 to 34 who had lost their jobs. That is the end of 2017. We don't have the current data right now, but I can almost assure you it's more. And Mr. Vice President, when you think about generating, and I want to stress the words here, decent work opportunities that will foster a path to development, that is what you ought to be offering the millennials. That is what you ought to be offering the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm not saying we're going to put $39+ million into OJT and then that will solve your problem. It will solve your problem for 2 years. Yesterday I was on a morning program and one of the callers spoke about she had 2 daughters who were just out of school. Both of them Well, they completed school and then completed the 2 years of the OJT program, and then cannot find work. They cannot find work now, and they are looking around and they are calling around. And Mr. Vice President, this is the situation facing so many families, that there are people, and I remember early on in the tenure of this government, all this talk about handouts and where money was being spent with handouts and whatnot. When you invest in people, when you invest in your citizens, your country will prosper. That is just how it works. And if you are saying to people, watching people who cannot get jobs, who cannot find decent work, and telling them, listen, the economy is still doing good, something is wrong with you as a government. And I will always stand by that, Mr. Vice President. But I want to point out that in my maiden contribution 2 years ago, on our budget debate, I said to the government, there are doctors in this country who are unemployed. And I was told by the minister that it was because they don't want to go in rural communities to work, etc. Mr. Vice President, do you know the number of calls I've received since then to say this is absolutely not true? That they just are simply not getting work? Can you imagine that we live in a country, Mr. Vice President, where you can go on to be a medical professional and unemployed, you're looking to work, you know. One of these young doctors currently working in a gas station in South Trinidad, Mr. Vice President, and they'll scoff at this and they will laugh at this. But when you have to pay your bills, right? When you have to pay your bills, you will take whatever opportunity you get. So I have no doubt, and I urge the young people to take the opportunity offered by OJT. But remember that this government does not offer you sustainable employment. They are offering you 2 years and nothing after that. Mr. Vice President, I would like to now turn to one of the announcements made by the minister in the Ministry of Finance, who spoke about the port in Moruga. So I'm talking directly now to the people of Moruga. And Minister of Trade came on right after to speak about a slew of activities in Moruga. Again, not surprising that in 2019, the PNM has discovered that Moruga exists, right? Not surprising.
Exactly.
Imagine, Mr. Vice President, and they will not recall, but a simple internet search will show you. They dismissed protests in 2016 where they were protesting for roads, and now I'm hearing about the road rehabilitation program. If you honestly believe that in 2020, that the population is still going to be fooled by freshly paved roads right before our election, you are dreaming, right? The people of Moruga 2 weeks ago were protesting for water, and they were protesting for water, Mr. Vice President. But here you are telling us about the port and the port in Moruga. And every time I hear it, I cringe a little bit, and I'll tell you why. Because I had done, years ago, research into this port, and I'm talking about years ago, because I don't know, you know, the previews in movies, you always hear coming attractions, coming soon. That is this port in Moruga. That is a constant coming attraction. You know, this first appeared in a 2003 budget statement, right, Mr. Vice President? And the advocates then claimed that the project was a promise from the PNM since 1956, Mr. Vice President. But it gets worse than that. There was, in 2005, and I am sure the Minister of Energy will not dispute any of this, because this is good research here, that in 2005, the offshore fishing study and the design of the port was done. This 2005. Cut to 2007, Minister of Energy now, former, the MP of Ottawa Mayaro, as it was at the time, Mr. Listener, 2007, said to the people of Moruga, a port would be built in Moruga. He said then that the port would be the largest in the Eastern Caribbean, and it will accommodate 175 pirogues, and most importantly, this is my favorite, the work is expected to start at the first quarter of 2008 and cost some 150 million, and that it would be delivered 2 years after. What year is this? 2019? Right. Same Minister of Energy, now in 2016. Now in 2016, as Minister of Rural Development. Look how much changes we had since then. Eh? But Minister Khan said, plans are on the way to start work on the $200 million Moruga fishing port in November of this year. The year is 2016 then. Eh? I will repeat, Mr. Vice President. He says the project will take, it's always the same 2 years. Eh? The project will take 2 years and 8 months to complete, and it will be the biggest fishing port in the English-speaking Caribbean.
Still waiting.
It's 2019. I mean, really and truly, Mr. Vice President, I can't believe this blatant commitment to this mama guy, that you could still stand up here in 2019 and tell us the port will start and it will be completed in 2 years, because they said 2021 now. Oh gosh, at what point in time you're going to stop mama guy and the people of Moruga? And this is historical fact, you know, Mr. Vice President. And I find it, quite frankly, very shameless that you could stand up time and time and time again, promise the same thing to the same people and not deliver it, and then still have the gall to come and say to the people of Moruga, the PNM is the way forward? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah, they will. Yes. Well, now we heard about the step building program. That's probably why the port wasn't completed, because they were building front steps, Mr. Vice President. But I'll tell you, because you know they like to talk about us. In 5 years, huh? The Moruga police station was built. There were 2 community centers in Marak and Hindustan. There were ECC schools that were built, and we left 2 under construction. I bet you they wouldn't tell us what the status of those are today. This is the UNC. Yeah? Kanhai Presbyterian and New Grand Government Primary School were built. They installed lights on the recreation grounds, Mr. Vice President. And you are talking from Moruga, yes, if you were familiar. I know you all driving to cut ribbons, but at least stop once or twice, every once or twice, and see the work that was done. Familiarize yourself with the work that was done. And I want to go back to that, this idea of being in power for 42 out of 57 years of our independence. That for the majority of this time, you could be promising people of Moruga the same thing. The same thing? Come on. Mr. Vice President, I'm telling you, that's why I cringe. Because I have this research. There's an entire briefing document on this one port that I would be very willing to share with the PN, because I can't believe while you're still doing feasibility study, because all of that was done already. Eh? So you are mamagaing the people of Moruga. Right? Mr. Vice President, I turn now to the $709 million that we are told we have to return to the IDF that was used to facilitate bridge financing based on the closure of Petrotrin and the payment of termination benefits, etc., or for the exit cost. Mr. Vice President, you as anybody would know, I have stood here many times and said that they embarked on the closure of Petrotrin and that they had no plan, and it was done in an ad hoc manner, it was done in a rushed manner, and it was done without any consideration of the human cost and the impact that we would see. And now we're seeing that plainly on paper. Because if you are telling me that you had to take $709 million from the IDF because of exit cost, and we're not talking yet about the human cost and the human factor, but if you're telling me that you now have to do that, it must mean that you had no idea how much this thing was going to cost you in the first place. So when we were telling you, hold your hand, take your time, figure this thing out properly. Mr. Vice President, in 2018, this is days after the announcement, in the statement that I made, we were talking about the fact that Petrotrin played an important economic role in Trinidad and Tobago. And it was a very important part of our energy and economic policy. And I said then that the ripple effect of shutting down the refinery cannot be predicted, but we ought to be embarking on this in a responsible manner. And I said, we asked for caution. We asked for you not to be rash. August, it was announced. By November, everything was shut down, and they're telling us that was not rash. But before I came here today, Mr. Vice President, I am still in contact with quite a number of these former Petrotrin workers, a vast majority of whom have not been able to find jobs after. Another fact that the government scoffs at. These people it's not that they're sitting idly by, they are looking for work because they have mortgages, they have bills mounting, and they're watching the severance package just slip away. And one of these Petrotrin workers said to me, one of them said to me, Mr. Vice President, had the government just simply put a committee in place to gather information about the 5,000 plus workers that they were going to let go, things could have been different. Because then you could have had targeted interventions in the employees. But we knew they didn't care about those people. We knew they didn't know any of them. They couldn't tell us the number. The number was guesswork. All we knew was all. But they were guessing the numbers. And they referred to the people as numbers. And all they were asking for were targeted interventions. Things like how many people had mortgages with TTMF, and therefore maybe we could look at a targeted intervention that way. How many people had children in school, targeted interventions. Instead, we're looking at $709 million, $709 million that we know of now. Nobody has told us the total cost of the shutdown yet. Nobody has told us the total cost of the shutdown. But $709 million we're talking about today. Just here, you take this, look at all the severance, we're making all your rich. That's what they were telling us. People are still suffering today. We had no targeted interventions, no targeted approach. It was rash. And Mr. Vice President, people are still paying the price for their poor decision making today. Now, I want to look at the $10 million for TTT. Right. I was on a panel discussion recently with the minister in the Ministry of Finance, where this $10 million came up. And we were told that it was to meet the mandate of TTT, local programming and local content. But the question was, and the question still is, on value for money. But before I get into that, because that statement is not in fact true, because this $10 million is going into live broadcast, and I'll get to that shortly. But I did my due diligence, and I went back to see what the statement the Minister of Communications made on the because when this whole rebranding from CNMG to TTT first came up, a lot of people were saying, is that value for money? Because you were telling us all along about our economic circumstances, tighten your belt and whatnot. Is that value for money? And the economist, Ms. Indira Sajawan, wrote a letter stating that the rebranding and the restructuring was quite frankly not value for money. And the Minister of the Minister of Communications, and that really was a slipper, but the Minister of Communications, so it was unintentional, wrote a response on the closure, because, he always likes to adopt a very defensive stance. And that response stated that he wanted to remind the nation that TTT, the mandate as set up of TTT, to put simply, the mandate of TTT, the company, as was the mandate of all TTT, was to operate like and compete against private media houses and profit as the bottom line. His words, not mine. So now we asked, when you were asked on Monday, how are you doing, TTT, in this profit-making scenario that the minister outlined? How is that working out? No answer. No answer to that. We go back to this, right? TTT is to be created, it will not solely be profit-driven, but will be established as a public service broadcaster. I'm good with that, you know. I like PBS, right? So you're looking, and that there's no denying that there would be a cost to the government. However, it is a public good for which the people are expected to pay a price, okay? As a public service broadcaster, this is the mandate of TTT, yeah? TTT will be mandated to have universal appeal, portray the diversity of cultures, and represent Trinidad and Tobago, promote our national identity, provide a platform for local content, provide a studio and editing services. And we were told it will not be a drain on the economy. I mean, most recently we had an announcement that Mastana Bahar will be back, and I guess that TTT is checking a box on local content, right? But no, I am not saying anything is wrong. I am saying this is the mandate. But then, when we look, Mr. Vice President, as what is presented before us today, one, can we now say, can anybody on the government bench get up and say that TTT has effectively met its mandate in the time since the rebranding? Can anybody then say, because my assumption is that the answer is no. So is anybody going to have to tell me, well, at the very least, this $10 million allocation was because when we looked at what we had before us, this is where we had the shortfall, and no. The $10 million is for live broadcast. It's out there. So, Mr. Vice President, again, like I said, if I did not know this was an election year, from the presentation of this supplementation, I would know it was an election year for sure. Because tell me what they're going to broadcast live. Huh? So, yeah, well, you know, as you ramp up, nobody's saying that, you know, I did it, right? As you ramp up, the year of propaganda, Mr. Vice President, I am not shocked that you're finding $10 million here, there, and everywhere now for things like this. And still, Madam, Mr. Vice President, still, nobody can tell us, like I said. Now, I would accept it if you get up and you say, this is what we've done, this is what we have accomplished so far, this is where the shortfall is, and this is why we need this money. That kind of responsible accounting I will allow, but you know what I'll get? Deflections, distractions, and non-answers, which is all they're good for. Mr. Vice President, I turn now to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the allocation to the TTPS. And I stand firmly, Mr. Vice President, with the men and women of the TTPS. And I have raised on a number of occasions the working conditions in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. But I noted there's $10 million going to the payment of salaries and allowances. And I can tell you what was happening here. And when I say you ignore people, this is a government that ignores the needs of people. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Mr. Vice President, allowances had not been going. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. They had not been getting their allowances. I'm talking about people who have been asked to go and work. As a matter of fact, they've been trying to cut down on overtime and figure out shifts in a way that the service is in a kind of disarray based on the money owed to them that has been stifled. And Mr. Vice President, we all know crime is a problem in this country. And for all of the ills of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, you cannot ask people to go out there and give their best and work their hardest and then deny them basics, like the money, like their salary, Mr. Vice President. So again, now after years, a few years of we can't pay this, we can't pay overtime, we're not going to pay our allowances, you're freeing up the money now. Like I said, if I did not know before, I would know it is an election year. But when you when you look at the money allocated to the TTPS as per the document given to us, Mr. Vice President, still, some of the basic things that they're asking for, they're meeting some of it, like the vehicle repairs, etc., but they're not meeting the request for equipment, where you're passing bills left, right, and center in here and not equipping the implementing agency. Again, a sign of sure incompetence by this PNM administration. So, Mr. Vice President, as I conclude, this government has had the end of 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and now the first half of 2019. As they presented, I saw the Minister of Trade tried her best to talk about achievements, and I'll give her that, but she's the only one who's even trying to have that conversation. The rest of them don't even bother. If you were listening, Mr. Vice President, none of them have been able to say, we've spent X, and this is what we've accomplished, because they're so fixated on 2010 to 2015. There's no accountability. And you've heard it from them before, that there's no reason to account us. They treat us, the population, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, with scant regard when we ask you to account for how you spent our money. But in 2019, it is not sufficient. It is not acceptable for you to come here and tell me I wasn't able to do anything. Sorry about that, but here are these projects that will be completed in 2019. Look, you didn't build anything in 4 years. I do not believe you're going to do it in 1 year. I really don't. But that they could stand here, Mr. Vice President, with their head held high and tell us and try to create this alternate reality and tell all of us, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, that here are these numbers. These are the things you have to believe in. This is what you must believe in. Don't worry about the fact that your personal circumstance is not so good. No matter that the majority of us are not better off today than we were in 2015. The fact that they're asking us to look at these numbers and take these numbers as fact, we will not accept that. But like I said, I'll end where I began. The United National Congress has already begun rolling out our plan for economic transformation and prosperity, and we will continue to do so in the face of the mismanagement of this PNM administration. And we ask that you judge us, one, on our past performance, but also on the account, Mr. Vice President, on the details that we will present to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because we have no problem presenting our plan for public scrutiny, because we know it will hold up and it will hold water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for recognizing me and allowing me to participate in this debate, an act to supplement the appropriation of the sum of issue which was authorized by the Appropriation Financial Year 2019, Act 2018, Act number 16 of 2018. I have to admit, coming after the last two speakers, I feel like I'm in an Avengers movie. With guns are blazing, with Iron Man followed by Captain Marvel. So I'll be like Ant-Man and take a small bite of the cherry and hope to move mountains like ants. So really and truly, this and I'm not saying this in a derogatory term, this is a formality, we know that. But it's a chance to raise a couple of points of commendation, interest, and concern following Minister Khan's contribution regarding the committees which the Honorable Prime Minister and himself have had the honor of leading in many instances. You know, it's interesting that a country's principles and tenets can really be deduced from its budgetary presentation in any administration. You see where the principles and the philosophies of that particular administration are directed. You know, we look at so many different matrices for analyzing the health of our economy. And many focus heavily, in our case, on the energy sector, and rightly so, because it has been our breadbasket for decades. But there are many other areas that we need to be looking at in terms of the economy, and not just looking statistically. but sometimes looking at the impact of the budget on people in a particular country. And, you know, following Minister Khan's comments about the Honourable Prime Minister, and I say this in a very complimentary way. It's not pejorative at all that the Prime Minister sits on the Energy Committee and the National Security Committee, which he should, because those are important areas. Sometimes I'd wish he'd also have time, because I know he's a busy man, to sit on the Agriculture and Education Committees, so we could get a lot of prioritization in those areas. Because wherever the leader of any government places his attention, you get a lot of prioritization in those areas. And it's not that we've been doing bad in those areas, but particularly agriculture, we have not been doing what we're supposed to do in Trinidad and Tobago. And that's for many reasons. I will start by going through a document I had the opportunity to peruse in preparation for this presentation. And that's just to quote a bit from the 2018, September 25th, IMF Executive document. Board concludes after consultations with Trinidad and Tobago, which was really a mixed package. There was quite a bit of commendation, but there's quite a lot of concerns also articulated. And the basket indicated some progress on fiscal consolidation, which they advocated should remain on track with revenue-enhancing measures and expenditure savings to create fiscal space for future shocks, which really looked at government's ability in the last 3+ years to reduce on a large-scale spending, which is commendable. There was a lot of editing, so to speak, in many areas. The number of ministries went down, so we saw a lot of savings where that is concerned. There was also the commendation by the IMF in terms of restoring external balance and insulating the economy from commodity price swings, and also the concerns of using this space to address the foreign exchange shortages by supplying sufficient FX at any given exchange rate and introducing gradual and greater flexibility. They suggested the exchange rate could play a more active automatic stabilizer role and help manage the transition to a more balanced foreign exchange market, which is still seeing quite a bit of concern from ordinary citizens and particular small to medium-sized businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. The report went on to indicate that the economy showed signs of improvement from the second half of 2017, following 2 years of recession. Real GDP contracted at a slower pace of 2.6% in 2017, following a 6.1% drop in 2016, driven by energy sector shocks. The strong recovery in gas production in 2017, H2, had knock-off effects on downstream industries, while oil production remained largely flat at a historically low level. The report also went on to indicate that the weak non-energy sector dampened the overall growth, reflecting weak activities in construction, financial services, trade, and continued shortages of foreign exchange and slow implementation of public investment projects. It also indicated that at that time, and this was released September 25th, once again 2018, and unemployment rate rose to 5.3%. Some suggest it's around between 4.4 to 4.8% now, from 3.3% in 2014. And what is very startling about this at this time of reporting is youth unemployment at an estimated 12% in 2017, compared to 7.9% in 2014. And following Senator Hayes' commentary in her presentation, that is of great concern to younger people, particularly those coming onto the job market in a situation where people have been let go and also looking for jobs. So it is of great concern there. The last part of the report, our quote, focuses on outlook and risks. Economic prospects are expected to improve broadly over the medium term. The economy is projected to recover as energy projects come in stream and recovery takes hold in the non-energy sector. Near-term growth will likely be led by natural gas production, with continued challenges in the oil sector and the subdued execution of the public sector investment. The PISP gradual recovery in the non-energy sector should help stabilize growth at 1.5% over 2018 to 2023. So that is also commendable. And the fiscal deficit projected to narrow 4% of the GDP over the medium term as energy revenues rise. Of course, we see the recent situation with the the fields, which Minister Khan sought to deal with in more detail in his presentation. Mr. Vice President, one of the points of concern I have, even if you consider the unemployment rate at 5%, is the issue of in Trinidad and Tobago. According to many models, that could be considered almost full employment. And even if we said we had full employment, we have to look at full employment in Trinidad and Tobago in the context of the levels of productivity or lack thereof. Because if we say we're turning a corner in Trinidad and Tobago and we're doing better, you could imagine if we had taken control and mitigated against our significant productivity issues in Trinidad and Tobago. Because when you think of the issue of productivity in any country, you look at the country's competitiveness on a global level, on a regional level, and if we're really maximizing the output of goods and services that go toward, in a really simplistic manner, the measurement of GDP for any time period. And I don't think that we have dealt effectively, or we are dealing effectively with the productivity issues in Trinidad and Tobago. So we, according to the government, we're making progress in X area. We are making progress in the energy sector in some areas, the non-energy sector, the manufacturing sector. Minister of Trade and Industry spoke about some elements of the creative sectors, which I'll cover a little more later on. But how productive are we as a country? And we know about the issues and the challenges we've had, not only in the public sector, but in the private sector where productivity issues are concerned. And and I'm sorry, my colleague, our colleague, the Minister of Labour and Small and Micro Enterprises is not here today, because we've heard about this Productivity Council. And I think, and this is not throwing the blame on the minister alone, because the issue of the Productivity Council in Trinidad and Tobago and its lack of progress, or its lack of productivity, ironically, falls on the shoulders of public sector, private sector, labor, and all of us. And if we don't find a way to come together to deal effectively with the productivity issues in Trinidad and Tobago, it directly affects our gross domestic product and our ability to produce goods and services at a really competitive level and compete with other economies around the world. And we're not doing that, and we have not done that. We have not done that in the last 15 years, so much so that we have settled into an abysmal culture of laissez-faire, and do it when you feel to do it, and being forced to work. And as the old saying goes, go get a public sector job in Trinidad and Tobago and you're good, because nobody can fire you in most cases. And we have not been able to effectively deal with this issue of productivity in this country. And I don't see steps being taken to address that in a really decisive way. I know there have been attempts to do it. I know there's been a lot of conversation about it. But if you really look at it, there are systemic issues that need to be dealt with. There are socio-cultural issues that need to be dealt with. And there are personal issues and training issues that need to be dealt with to really effectively diagnose, on one hand, the real issues with our productivity challenges in Trinidad and Tobago, and put systems in place and a program in place to effectively deal with it. And we can talk about growth and progress and turning the corner all we want in Trinidad and Tobago. If we want to be really a competitive country and take our place among the developed countries, we like to quote Japan a lot in Trinidad and Tobago, we have to frontally deal with productivity. And we have not done that in any way, form, or fashion. And that is something I think needs to be prioritized by the government at this time in a very, very decisive way. Among the issues linked to productivity in Trinidad and Tobago is the issue of underemployment and the fact that we are training so many people in so many areas through GATE and other state-sponsored initiatives. But are we really seeing the benefit of it nationally through you, Madam President? And I don't think so. What we're seeing is thousands and thousands of young, middle-aged, and other people being trained. In many cases, getting so frustrated, we're having the start of another incarnation of brain drain in Trinidad and Tobago. young people getting frustrated, and in many cases, being trained in areas where there are no jobs along the government stated developmental lines in Trinidad and Tobago. And I know there's been talk by the Honorable Minister of Labour, Small and Micro Enterprises, about the alignment of the education and the gate disbursement with the government stated development policies, but it's not happening. And you're seeing thousands and thousands of young people coming out of tertiary education institutions in Trinidad and Tobago and just not having work or being underemployed, which is really adding to the wastage we see in Trinidad and Tobago. And that needs to be addressed. If we are deciding that we're going in a particular direction and we're investing as we should at the levels that we are in education, there must be outlets and jobs so that young people can be put to work, but continue training on the job in those areas, and also being productive or adding to the production of goods and services in Trinidad and Tobago, and that is not happening. And we're not quantifying the losses in those areas. And we have every year, cohort after cohort after cohort, coming out of universities, as Senator Haynes said, doctors, lawyers, people in all sorts of spheres, and not getting the opportunity to work at the level that they're being trained at, and not being able to, and the country not benefiting from the significant investment in education in those young people. In many cases, as we've seen in I think it's the late 80s, early 90s, it leading to a great brain drain and human resource drain in Trinidad and Tobago to the benefit of other jurisdictions. So we really have to look at that and come together as a state in terms of dealing with that. Some of the ways we should look at improving productivity also includes the following. You know, there's something called a cycle. Drawing experiences, a virtuous cycle, drawing experiences, some national experience in terms of the investment in skills development and accelerating growth and investment in those areas where young people are coming out. Minister of Trade and Industry spoke about the expansion of the creative industries and the investment in those, and that's commendable. The live music centers which have been ongoing, I really have not been able to make the linkages between that and the creation of an industry that generates money. The issue of I think $12 million the minister indicated through you, Madam President, that the country was able to get in revenue from as a film from Film TT, which is also commendable. The investment in the bespoke and the couple, I think it's 50-something minister, I think you said, who were trained in that area, but 27 people trained in that area, and that's commendable. But how is that redounding to build a national fashion industry? It's good for a few people, but what about the established designers who have established brands and production lines, Mailing, Peter Elias, Claudia Pigas, etc.?
I thank you so much, and that is the VCIP program. So the bespoke tailoring will dovetail into the VCIP program. And as you know, I spoke about the 4 tiers. The top tier are for those who are ready for the export market. And Vincent Kwan from Fashion Institute is working with the TTT on those ones, Claudia, like the level of Claudia Pigas. Mailing is in that batch, that top 5. And those are the people that are ready to export. So that's how we are filtering. Thank you.
Thank you for the information.
I'm listening.
Yeah. So I'm glad that's happening, because while you're working on the new cohort of designers for the next 20 years, there are those, I call them legacy designers, who have already made their mark and have their production lines on stream and can also contribute in a holistic way. You know, and I'm saying this in the context of some research I was able to do. Trinidad and Tobago, we like to talk about great creativity. Now, we are creative people. We could walk down the road and sing a song. We could drive a car reverse around the Queen's Park Savannah. We're very, very good. We could soft crash land a helicopter.
Right around.
You know, but the hard land, okay. That is semantics. This helicopter crash land. So you, Madam President, you all are distracted. I could twist this better than anybody.
Enjoying themselves in a little crosstalk, but we need to listen to Senator Richards in silence, please. Senator Richards, continue.
Thank you, Madam President. I told you this was an Avengers movie, you know. And I'm seeing it in the context that we created a steel pan, We created calypso, soca, chutney, pop music, gospel music, and we have so much talent, but we have no infrastructure in place. We recognize we have resources in oil and gas, so we built the Point Lisa Industrial Estate. Where's the analogous infrastructure for the music industry in Trinidad and Tobago at that level? Because we invested significantly in Point Lisa, and I hear the minister's comments about the small steps that are being taken, and that's great. And I say that in the context that in 2015, the global entertainment industry was the fastest growing in the world. Yes. 1.2 trillion. By 2017, 1.9 trillion. By 2019, it's expected to, at the end of this year, reach $2 trillion globally. You know, the US part of it, 712 billion. US exports $21.3 billion in creative content, and the sector is called Entertainment, Media, and Copyright Industries. We're underestimating the repository of works we've already created that are ready for sale around the world. It's just a matter of infrastructure and marketing. It is infinite because we can always create. It is not finite like oil and gas. We're talking about publishing of books, video games, $100 billion, 51% of global entertainment exports. Box office, $9.9 billion, 5%. Book publishing, $39 billion. We have academics in Trinidad and Tobago who have written so many books they're not marketed internationally on the global book market. And the copyright of these come with additional cost and licensing fees. Are we looking at these areas in terms of creativity and the creative industries? Home video is $209 billion, 11% video on demand, $11 billion. We're producing carnival every year, beautiful costumes, music. Are we packaging those for export? Yes. At what level? Yes, at what level? And how are we to respond through you, Madam President, to the Minister's interjection, and welcome interjection at that? How are we positioning those products and services to be competitive? Because we're a small player. The US created Hollywood. Now they're creating Atlanta and New York as nexus in terms of areas that are producing content. They're investing heavily in Atlanta as a fashion center. We're a small player, so we have to come together and pool our creative resources in a really structured manner to be able to take advantage of this. And something that Senator Vera always talks about, copywriting and archiving. It's a billion-dollar industry. I remember many years ago I was doing a documentary. I was giving my colleagues this on the table during the tea break. I was doing a documentary and wanted to find a piece of footage from Trinidad and Tobago's pre-independence and independence days. And the footage was located from Trinidad and Tobago and owned by the Smithsonian Institute. So I called and inquired, or I wrote and inquired, well, how much do I have to pay to get this footage to finish this documentary? And I had to recoil because I couldn't afford it. And 30 seconds for 2 airings of that 30-second piece of footage made in Trinidad and Tobago, for 2 airings, 30 seconds, was $2,500 US. We create footage every year. Carnival, mass, pan, chutney, steel pan, calypso. But we're not packaging it, and we're not marketing it as a resource. We're giving it away. Every year, documenters come into Trinidad and Tobago and pay a small license fees and take out valuable content and make millions outside with our content. And it's again because of the Dutch system. We have oil and gas, and once the oil price and the gas price go up, we forget everything else. Or let me not say that, we pay less emphasis on it. That would be a more accurate statement. So I think we really need to look at that creative industry, and not just in small steps, in a substantial investment, as if we mean it. Jamaica is putting so much emphasis on sport because they've seen success and global branding through their sport ambassadors. We all know how our global sport ambassadors are. And I know we're using them in some small ways, but not in the way that Jamaica is. Jamaica is now a global center for training athletes. Global center. Barbados is having a cannabis conference tomorrow. And the laws ain't passed yet. because they see the potential of it down the road. You don't come from behind the curve. You realize the potential of a burgeoning industry, and you put systems in place beforehand to take advantage of it. Cannabis is going to be big money down the road, whether we get to the point where we decriminalize it, Trinidad and Tobago or not. You cannot turn your back on what's happening around the world where the medicinal aspect and applications of it are concerned, and other kinds of applications, even for leisure. So my suggestion is just looking at it in that manner and hoping that we can stop talking about these things in terms of diversification. And I hate to use that word, not to be quite frank, through you, Madam President, because it's been beat up so much without any real results over the years. But really, seriously realize the potential of it and invest in it. And I went off a little course then talking about how we can increase productivity. Heighten awareness of the roles of skills acquisition and promoting formalization of the informal economies in Trinidad and Tobago. I know Minister West has spoken a lot about the state trying to put systems in place to get the state's portion of many of the informal industries in Trinidad and Tobago, which are great for people to set up their small businesses, but they have to be brought into the loop. And also, really, emphasizing the role of employers and work organizations in advancing skills development to improve productive levels and put systems in place at the state and private sector level to facilitate productivity. Very often we look at productivity as only, well, we're lazy in Trinidad and Tobago, but very, very often we've outgrown the systems that were implemented 30, 40 years ago. We've outgrown the structure that worked 30, 40 years ago in terms of having a productive society and public service. It's just not going to work now, the way it's set up, with the kind of expansion of population and the different skills and requirements of running a country today. So if we don't look at that and deal from a public admin perspective of restructuring the public service, no matter how much people want to work hard, it's never going to be as productive as we can and create as competitive a country as we should be. So it's a very complex thing, I know, but if we don't start looking at the issues frontally and putting systems in place to deal with productivity from a systemic level, from a structural, infrastructural level, and from a personal and socio-cultural level, we are going to be spinning top in mud. And in closing, Madam President, because I don't intend to be long, one of the responses that I would welcome from the Minister, and I know we tend to look at budgets and appropriation bills and media reviews in a particular context of stats and gross domestic product and headline inflation rate, etc., and that's great. Those things are important. But I also want us to look at it from a really focused people's perspective. And I was able to get some really interesting questions from a document titled Australian Journal of Sustainable Business and Society, Volume 1, March 2015, a critical analysis of development indices. And it asks a couple questions in terms of fiscal and monetary policy in any jurisdiction as a different or an additional method of analysis of how effective they are and how effective and how positively or negatively they may be impacting the people, because at the end of the day, this comes down to people. Budget reviews come down to people and their lives. First, the numbers need to display an understanding of the distribution of material well-being within society and how this is related to the way our society is organized. Secondly, how does the policy assess the impact of both universal and targeted actions on different socioeconomic groups? How are the policies impacting the taxation and fiscal policies? How are they impacting ordinary people, particularly vulnerable groups, in terms of housing, welfare programs, education, labor market, and health? How the policy, are we getting data on how the policies are impacting those people in those areas? Thirdly, are we gleaning data on the actual distribution of material well-being and people's ability to acquire goods and services to satisfy their daily needs? Are we doing surveys about that? Asking people in all over Trinidad and Tobago, how are you faring? What have the policies been able to give you? And what do you still need? Are the policies that we're implementing impacting you positively, as I'm sure the government hopes. And this goes for any administration. Is there social exclusion? Definitive research on consumer behavior when policies are implemented. You know, it's interesting, you know, one of the comments I heard in the other place, as a point of analysis by the Honorable Minister of Finance in terms of how he knew that the economy was doing well, was the sale of cars. No, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. That's from, I guess, a business perspective, because he has to look at it in a comprehensive way. But on the other side of it, we should be asking, are we able to buy edibles and plantain to satisfy our family's nutritional needs? So I have no problem with the sale of cars, but it needs to be in a holistic way. It needs to span the gamut of those who can buy cars and straight down the demographic chain. The other question is, how unequal is the distribution of material wealth in any particular country? And how does this compare to past years? So we can have comparisons and graphs so we see if we're going up or down and if the policies are actually bearing the fruit that they're intended to. What are the characteristics and circumstances of households with low material well-being or considered at a risk for poverty, where groups are in greatest need of financial support? And how does this also compare with earlier years and with other countries? Are we doing those types of analyses in terms of how the policies in budget or in the mid-year review are being applied? Because it is great to look at the GDP and the price of oil and the price of gas and the indices from a macroeconomic perspective, but we need to also get this kind of information to see if what you're doing. And in any administration's life, this is vital information to see, well, if those voting blocks are satisfied or not. What are the characteristics of people who experience persistent economic hardship? Because there are groups in society, in our society, that actually have, for a number of years, 5, 10, 15 years, experienced persistent economic hardship. And how do the characteristics of people who move out of poverty compare to those who actually remain poor? What made the difference in those who were able to change their circumstances? Is it a particular policy decision, or is it something else? Because that information also can help to see, well, this policy works, so let's apply it across the board. I don't know that we're doing that, or if it is being done, we don't have the information. Is the average or typical level of material well-being growing or declining over time? And what does this mean for macroeconomic policies? And how do transfer systems affect the economic well-being of particular groups, particularly the vulnerable groups in our society? And also, and there's a long list, I'll just read one more. In our circumstance in Trinidad and Tobago, just like how we have macroeconomic shocks in the system, there are things that happen on a daily basis or on a monthly basis in Trinidad and Tobago that affects people and their livelihood and their life events, and how well or how robust are their lives or the systems, the transfer systems, able to buffer those for those people. Because it's important for us to look at all aspects of society and how all groups in society are affected when we do budgets and when we are analyzing, as in this so-called mid-year review. And not just look at it as, well, we're transferring $1,839,189,300, which is important. But to me, it's also very important to understand on the ground how these policies are directly affecting people. So I'm hoping that through you, Madam President, Minister West can give some kind of insight, if that information is available, in her wind-up, in the effect that, because as I indicated, my research is showing a mixed bag. We're not pretending that we're out of the woods, but the IMF report and other documents have shown that we have made some progress in Trinidad and Tobago from where we were 3 years ago. There's still a lot of work to be done in challenges in particular areas, but I really want to hear and hope that systems are put in place to find out how ordinary people are doing on the ground, particularly vulnerable groups. And with those few words, Madam President, I thank you.
Minister of Public Utilities, recognize the Minister of Public Utilities, but at this stage, we will suspend the sitting and we will return at 5:30 p.m. So we'll return at 5:30 p.m. and the Minister of Public Utilities will begin his contribution.